How often have you walked into a room or seen somebody walk into a room and you just went, wow, they have something, they have an energy, they have a charisma, they have something that makes them stand out and you notice them in a positive way. That is presence. Now, how do you get that?
Who doesn't want to be a great leader? A leader who's calm under pressure, insightful, respected, well-liked. But what does it take to become a great leader? Hey, I'm Boo, and welcome to my podcast. The Few Leadership Podcast defines great leadership and what great leadership looks like. And I've found some of the world's best leaders or experts in the field of leadership to help you accelerate your leadership journey so you can be an ace at the game of leadership. If you're ready to rethink everything you know about leadership, if you're excited about accelerating your leadership journey, let's strap in and ignite your leadership potential. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Few Leadership Podcast with me, Boo, and our speaker series. Wow, I think I say every single introduction the same, which is I'm very excited about today's podcast. And I really am. I have just been blessed to have the opportunity to speak to so many remarkable people. And today we're going to speak to an incredible woman who is an Emmy Award-winning news anchor, has had the opportunity to sing in front of the Pope. How cool would that be? But now lives a life in service to leaders as an executive coach, an author of the book, Dare to Own You. Liz Brunner, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. This is going to be awesome.
Oh, Boo, I am just delighted you invited me. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I know that we're going to connect on a lot of levels. We already had a little pre-call, if you will, and we have a lot to talk about today.
Yeah, I kind of accidentally do most of the podcast before the podcast, but that's cool. We'll go revisit that. Liz, today you live a life in service to leaders. You've been around leadership your whole life. You've got that unique skill that I think all leaders need, which is to make the complex simple and the simple compelling in storytelling and communication. I think you're also the happiest, smiliest person we've ever had. So your energy is just like transmitting down through the podcast here. But what did you tell me, some of the challenges you're seeing within the leadership space at the moment?
I think there are several things that are impacting leaders today in terms of them moving the dial. And one of the first things is executive presence. Executive presence accounts for approximately 26% of what it takes to get promoted. So that is a huge piece, executive presence. Now, then the next level I would say is confidence. There are some leaders who more maybe portray being confident, but they really don't feel it on the inside. And there are ways to mask it, but wouldn't it be wonderful if you could feel it on the inside as well? And so that's one of the things I also work on with clients is that confidence. But where that stems from often is the limiting beliefs that they might have about themselves. Oh, I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I can't make that change. Those are all inhibiting leaders today. And another is they are so used to doing things a certain way. They have habits that got them to where they are today, but may not get them to where they want to go tomorrow. And if you've done something for 10 years, 20 years, and in some cases even longer than that, it's hard to change old habits. They die hard, and you have to be willing and open to making those changes. And finally, I would say a lack of preparation. Believe it or not, I can't tell you how many leaders that I work with say, well, I just wing it. Well, guess what? 80% of your success comes from preparation and properly preparing. And so sometimes working with clients to teach them how to prepare so that it's not like you're cramming for a test. So those are some of the things that I believe are what are inhibiting leaders today from moving that dial forward.
Yeah, it's super insightful. Yeah, I think I've had anyone on the podcast on the series yet that's really identified that preparation piece. I personally think that in itself is one of the biggest failings of leadership now. I think it's conditioning from digital. I think it's conditioning from constantly waking up and having a full inbox and just knee-jerk reacting all day. We call it, going from react to think act. And in the Air Force, we used to have a saying, which is perfect preparation. So the thing you can control prevents poor performance, the 5 Ps. We had a few more Ps and they were rude words, so I'm not going to say what they were. I don't think it's like that anymore. We're a bit more PC. So all of the points you've mentioned have their basis in self-awareness, it seems. An awareness that we're set in our ways, an awareness that we're showing up without presence, an awareness that we're, suffering imposter syndrome, and instead of papering over it, get to the root cause of that. And in your book, Dare to Own You, really that's kind of the thesis, right? Like at the end of the day, your success comes down to you and how you view you and how you grow you. What techniques do you have, or how have you seen a leader step up from a low presence to, I'm just going to go through all four of these right now and see how you kind of help shape the solution to that. So when you talk about not having presence as a leader, what is the foundation there, and how do we grow into a leader that does have presence?
First of all, presence or confidence or leadership, any of those things, you're not born knowing how to do any of those things. You learn how to do them. You learn how to develop presence. Let me ask you this question, Boo. I'm sure the answer is yes, but to your listeners, how often have you walked into a room or seen somebody walk into a room and you just went, wow, they have something, they have an energy, they have a charisma, they have something that makes them stand out and you notice them in a positive way? That is presence. Now, how do you get that? How do you get that kind of confidence? That comes down to the it factor, intentional transformation. It's about aligning your physical, your mental, and your relational self. And that physical is a number of different things, but it starts with the physical. It starts with, what is your body language communicating to the world? Where are your eyes looking? How is your posture? All of those nonverbal cues, 65% of what you communicate to the world is nonverbal in that presence piece. So now let's take it to the next level. When your physical presence, when you're really thinking about those nonverbal communication tools, as I like to call them, what are you doing with your energy? What is your energy that's going out there? What is your physical movement energy? Our body is energy. We're always sending and receiving signals like a submarine sonar. So what are you doing with that? And then it's movement of the body. And I'm a big proponent of exercise and movement. I'm not saying you have to go to the gym 6 or 7 days a week like I do. That's just me. But what are you doing to take care of this body? Because when you take care of the body, that physical presence, now that leads to the mind. That's the bridge to your mind, to the mental clarity. And what are you telling yourself when it comes to presence and when it comes to confidence? What are you telling yourself? Are there limiting beliefs? Is there imposter syndrome? 75% of the population suffers from imposter syndrome. And those thoughts that you have in your head, we have something like 50,000 thoughts a day, and 95% of them are on repeat. So what are you telling yourself? Because that becomes your habit, that becomes your action and your belief in yourself. Now let's take it to the next level. When your physical and mental are aligned, the third pillar in intentional transformation and achieving that it factor, to have more confidence, more presence, more authenticity, more influence, is the relational self, to the self-awareness that we just talked about. You mentioned, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? I prefer to call them challenges, opportunities for growth, as opposed to...
Yeah.
But do you know what your strengths are? Do you know what your challenges are? Are you living your core beliefs? And what are you putting out there? Because the relationship you have with yourself is the relationship you're then going to have with everyone else, whether they're direct reports, whether they're superiors, to the outside world. All of that combined is how you have more presence, more confidence, more authenticity, more influence. And so when I'm working with clients, I'm working on all of those pieces. It's not just one, but I start with the physical, the nonverbal, and also the relationship piece also is about your communication skills. Are you able to tell your story? Are you able to share the message that you need to share? Because in my opinion, everything is a story. A pitch, a presentation, whatever message you need to share, it's all story. But a lot of people don't know how to tell stories well. And with my journalism background, I've had a little bit of experience of that. So it's a combination of a lot of different things to get you to that next level of that it factor.
Both Liz and I were 15 minutes early today on this podcast. And to me, that comes from being immersed at a formative period of life in an environment that values time, that literally measures time in seconds, not days, not weeks. And I think when you talk intentionality, you're kind of talking preparation, right?
Yes.
And I think, I certainly take it for granted, and I suspect you would too, is the environment that we were in that taught us how to have presence, that was very visual. There's nothing like delivering a mission brief in front of a room of 200 operators to make sure you don't and ah, that you don't come across as not clear, as is being on the television in front of millions of people. So maybe, Liz, when we talk intentionality, let's get practical around this, right? I mean, you can't tell a story and have presence unless you write your story prior to the moment you need to have the presence, right?
Yes. A lot of people don't know how to tell a story, how to put that content together. A lot of people were taught or learned, well, let me tell you what I'm going to tell you today. And then they tell you, and then they retell you what they just told you. I believe that is so old school today. That does not work today. Think about how instant everything is today. You have to get to the heart of the matter immediately, or you are going to lose people. When I'm working with people on how to put their content together, yes, there's an open, which is the hook. Yes, there's a middle, which is the meat, the nuts and the bolts. And yes, there's a close. But when I work with people, I say, let's figure out what the close is first. In other words, what's in it for the audience? Not what you think they want to hear, but what do they truly need and want to hear? When you figure that out, because it's always about them, it is not about you. When you figure that out, now you can use that to create a hook that's going to draw people in from the moment you begin speaking. That's how you get connection. That's how you get people to say, oh, I want to hear more. I want to hear more. Think about the show Shark Tank. I'm sure your listeners have seen the show. Maybe you have as well. And when the contestants come on, what do? Obviously, they say their name, but they tell the sharks what's in it for them, how much it's going to cost to get in on that action, to get in on
get to the point. Yeah.
That gift, that idea. And then they go into explaining a little bit more, but they hook them in. What's the most important thing they want and need to hear? How much is this going to cost me to get in on this deal? So you have to find a way to connect with your audience immediately, to make it relatable immediately. And what a lot of people do, well, they want to set it all up. They have this sort of plan in place of, we have this mission, we have this, we have that. No, get to the heart of the matter immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen this at big annual events, 4 days off-site, and every leader gets a chance to tell what they want to do in the next year. And it's a 45-minute presentation, of which the first 42 minutes is, look at all the work I've done. Look at all the analysis I've done.
Yes.
Look at how hard I've worked. And the last 3 minutes is, and this is what it means to you, at which point everyone's asleep, right? No one's paying attention anymore. They're on their phone. Let's have a little bit of a deeper dive on the hook, because, I certainly know, as part of a social media strategy, it's always the hook. And it's quite hard, to sit. You can't do a hook 2 minutes before wandering into a meeting, right? So when you talk hook, what do you actually mean? What is the intention of a hook?
Well,
what does it look like?
Yes, the intention of the hook is to capture their attention, to intrigue them enough in those first, 8 to 10 seconds where they're thinking, they get me. They know what I need. They know what I want to hear. I want to hear more. But the only way you figure that out is if you've done the preparation, if you've done your homework. Have you studied who these people are that you're talking to? Do you know what their concerns are? Do you know what their challenges are? Do you know what they want and need to hear? And so when you can figure that piece out, and sometimes it takes a long time just to figure that piece out.
Yeah.
When you do, it makes such a huge difference, because now you've drawn everybody in to say, I want to hear more.
Yeah.
Credential yourself, let it go. I mean, that'll show up. I'm working with a doctor from Italy right now. And when we first started working together about seven months ago, he had this very high need to credentialize himself, to showcase what he's done and how many years he's been a doctor and what clinic he started here and this. And I said, time out. What does this U.S. audience of doctors want to know? We can sprinkle in your credentials along the way, but it's always a part of the story. And so it's fun to help people figure out that content and how to put that hook together, because it is huge. It's so important.
I think it's hard as well because it requires you to ask questions of people. It requires you to get curiosity. I call it, there's no immediate return on investment. Whereas if you react to an email and tell someone what to do, I call it the Avenger syndrome, right? Like I can be a superhero because I can manage a crisis. But if you just slow the truck up a little bit and thought before you acted, you wouldn't have created the crisis that you've just solved as a leader. Confidence. I think everyone wants to be confident, and some people are innately confident, I guess, and others are, maybe some of the folks who would be the most competent leaders of an organization aren't because they lack confidence. How does a leader get confident?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure confidence, we're not born with it. Some people say we are, some people say we aren't.
Well, I don't know.
Interpretation.
If you talk to my mum, she'll tell me you've just always been confident. Maybe too much so.
I believe that some people are enthusiastic. They might even be called extroverts, but that has been nurtured in their environment. And so therefore it presents as being confident. Now, confidence can be a bit of like a weather barometer. Some days you feel like you got it and some days you don't.
So true.
But how do you practice confidence? And I believe you can practice confidence to develop more confidence. And I believe it is not something that's static and stays there all the time. It does shift. Now, can you minimize the swings of confidence? Absolutely. And that's often the goal, is how do you develop more of it? Well, you put yourself into situations starting with small risk to get better and own more of your confidence. Preparation helps you be confident, because when you know what content you want to share, you're automatically going to be more confident because you've prepared. I love to play a little game, and this may sound silly, but I call it my ABC game. And I will do it when I'm out walking or running. It's A, I am authentic. I am attractive. I am awesome. B, I am brave. I am beautiful. I am bold. C, I am confident. I have charisma. I literally go through the alphabet and I come up with adjectives that help me think about I am statements. Now, those alone aren't going to get you there. You have to believe them. You have to believe them. And in my book, I actually outline a number of different things that you can do to develop your confidence. Let's say you're afraid of public speaking, which a lot of people are. And so how do you develop more confidence? Well, you put yourself into situations where you can develop more of it. Maybe you go read at the library to a group of students. Maybe you put yourself out there and offer to take on a project, because you know you're going to put yourself out there. It does require risk, but that is where growth happens, outside of your comfort zone.
Wow.
And you have to practice confidence. You absolutely can practice it. You can develop more of it.
If you're enjoying the show, I'd just like to ask of you a little favor. We're on a mission here to ignite the world's leadership potential. We need to reach out to as many leaders as we possibly can. So if you're enjoying the show, I just ask you to leave a review, to subscribe, to help introduce this podcast to other leaders to join you on your journey to flawless leadership. We're going to head back to the episode now. I hope you've enjoyed what you've learned today. Please remember, let's ignite a movement of flawless leaders. Subscribe, leave a review. Let's get back to the show. Maybe let's use a real world example. I mean, you've had the opportunity to interview some pretty powerful people, President Obama, okay, for example. Now, did you just rock up on the morning and decide, hey, me and Barack, we're just gonna chat. We're gonna talk about whatever, or did you prepare? And maybe because I know as part of my Air Force training, I did a media course, which is about, hey, you got to watch out for those journalists. They're coming. They want to take you somewhere. Yeah, they're coming in. They're going to be like a dog with a bone, and you've got to look in the background, make sure there's nothing on fire, make sure there's nothing, you've got to be so aware in the moment, because as a journalist, you prepare to the nth degree. Yeah.
Yes. And I was known for doing
about your preparation for when you interviewed President Obama?
Well, first of all, yes, I absolutely prepared. But now let me take it a step further and go backwards. It took me 4 years to get that interview. I kept writing the White House. Nobody returned my emails because I was writing to a generic email address. But one day, somebody actually wrote me back and said, yeah, we want to get you here. And I was like, yes. So I jumped on that. And as soon as there was permission that I was going, there was major preparation from the standpoint that the news director, the senior executive producer, we all got involved in what is Liz going to ask President Obama. And I only had a very short amount of time with him. I think it was like 8 minutes or something like that. And I had to create 4 entirely different stories that I was going to go live with that same night in Washington, D.C. And so there was a lot of preparation, and also the White House had their own agenda. So now we were trying to figure out how could we balance this, still get our questions in, but also appease the White House with the things that we knew that the president wanted to talk about. So it was a balancing act of all of that. So there was a lot of preparation, but I had also told myself, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I don't care what your politics are. To be able to interview a sitting president is a big deal. And going to the White House and speaking to him in the diplomatic room is a big deal. But now, because I wanted to make sure that I could find a way to be relatable to him, I grew up in the islands of Hawaii. He was born in Hawaii. So my first time when he walked in, I said, hello, Mr. President, and he said, hello, Liz. And I said, or should I say aloha? And then I explained the situation of, yes, I grew up there. And so we already had a moment of connection. And that's what's so important about going back to the open. It's about connection, relatability. So then I asked all of my questions that I wanted to ask. It was very hard because I didn't have time to do follow-up questions, which I normally would do. And I saved one question to the very end because I didn't want his team to kick me out the door if I asked it too soon. And that was, you are the leader of the United States. You're the president, but you're also the father of 2 teenage girls, which is harder. Again, it was a relatable moment. He had a great answer. He said, I'm very fortunate. I have 2 wonderful daughters. But, Boo, what's so surprising to me is people who saw all 4 stories that I did, you know what they remember? They remember those 2 moments.
Yeah.
Because they were about connection and relatability.
Mm. And authenticity.
Yes.
I mean, I think one of the hardest things as a leader is people see you as a leader first and Liz second, right? And the more you can bring those 2 worlds together, it seems to be, the proliferation of reality TV kind of tells you that people want to see authenticity over manufactured, high production type of storytelling, unless it's a movie, of course. So you're an executive coach, so you see lots of different leaders and lots of different personalities. And I think another mistake that you see in leaders is leaders read a book about a leader and they say, I want to be like that leader. And then they try and show up as someone who's not them. And then they start to lead. And I see this particularly in sales teams, where a sales leader starts to talk like an NFL coach. And immediately it's like, ooh, this is not an NFL team. And the way in which you're communicating and the stories that you're telling are not relating to the mother of 3 kids over here. Mm-hmm. They're not relating to the kid at school that never played sport. And all of a sudden you just watch this disengagement. How do you, prepare, learn, read, consume a lot of knowledge and then come at it as your authentic self?
First of all, you have to know your audience. Know your audience. They're not an NFL team. They're moms with young kids. Whatever that audience is, you have to know who that audience is. And it comes back to that authenticity piece. Just because you read a book on how to be a leader doesn't necessarily make you a leader. What are you putting into action? What are you putting into play that is authentic to you? That you can show up as a leader. Because leaders have to have the ability today to be an effective leader, to be able to adjust, to be able to pivot, to rise above, have resilience. Leaders today are faced with so many challenges, what they probably have for generations. And they will always continue to face situations. So how do you show up How do you show up? Again, coming back to, can you connect all these pieces of you? Because if you are aware of who you are and what your strengths are, your challenges are, that relational piece, that's how you're going to relate to other people. That's how you're going to communicate with other people.
Isn't that hard though? I mean, if you're a CEO, right, and you have that incredible amount of diversity in an organization, or you're a news anchor and you're speaking to Boston. I mean, how do you maintain your authenticity when the people you're speaking to are just so diverse?
Are you living your core values? Is there a question about who you are or not? To me, that's authenticity, is you are living your true core values. There's never a question about who you are. Vulnerability is different. I believe there's a difference between authenticity and vulnerability. Vulnerability is not sharing every story, wearing your heart on your sleeve. It's sharing the stories with the people who've earned the right to hear them. And so again, coming back to knowing your audience, what stories can you share that are going to connect, that are real, that are authentic, that speak to your core values? Are you changing your core values? Or are you living them out? And as a leader, are you agile enough to adapt how you communicate and connect with people to achieve a strategic outcome? When I'm coaching individuals, there are some people that I have to be very direct with, or the message is not going to get through. There are other people that I know I need to kind of come around and help them figure it out for themselves and understand what they need to learn and what they need to grow and what they need to develop. So can you adapt? Are you able to accept as a leader that not everyone is going to agree with your leadership style, let alone the fact that you are the leader? As a leader, it's very lonely at the top sometimes because not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to agree with you. Not everybody is going to understand you, especially if you're dealing with 8,000 people, for example. But can you find a way to be authentic and true? And that relatability is what will help you have influence, will help you have followership.
It's, as you're talking, I'm just having this thought, which is, companies and organizations run through the process of purpose, vision, mission, goals, values. I don't think we do that ourselves. And we have that conversation internally and say, what is my purpose? What's my vision?
Exactly.
What's my mission? What do I actually do to serve people? And what are my values? And I think we unintentionally live true to our values, but it goes back to your storytelling, I guess, which is to say, what is my story? And, I think some people have that inherently. I think if you're like a entrepreneur or you're somebody that is a founder that's building something, the company's vision becomes yours. But I think when you look at a publicly listed company or a very, very big SMB, I mean, how do we do that? I mean, what would your advice be to a leader in terms of defining those values, and then kind of living true to them? Let's say, for example, you've got the positive affirmation, your ABC mindset, set the framework, get the neural pathways firing out of the negative bias into positivity. But practically speaking, I mean, what does an intentional leader do before they open their mouth? And what do they do if they say something wrong?
Well, it happens all the time, number one. But it's also acknowledging that I just made a mistake and it's okay. Nobody's perfect. Sometimes being imperfect is more perfect because you're being your best authentic self. This is not about perfection. And accepting that is a big piece of it. You touched on something that I think may help explain some of this a little bit, which is, I'll use my story. I say I'm Liz 4.0. I'm in my fourth career chapter. I was a high school music teacher singing semi-professionally, realized there was something more I was supposed to do, didn't know what it was. I left teaching, worked in retail for a couple of years to figure it out, got into television, had a 28-year career. And then again, I felt like there was something more I was supposed to do, left television, and launched my business nearly 12 years ago now as an executive communications coach, keynote speaker, author, and podcast host. Now, people say, well, how did you do all of that? I connected the themes and patterns as a singer and a teacher, sharing stories through song with my voice. As a journalist, I was sharing other people's stories. As a coach, I'm helping other people learn to tell their story using their voice. As a keynote speaker and author, I'm sharing my story using my voice. So my themes and patterns are storytelling and using my voice. I connected those dots. Can you connect your dots? Can you put yourself in a witness position and see what threads and experiences are in your life? Because no knowledge is ever wasted. That's how you discover what your themes and patterns are. That's how you discover what your core values are. Are you living them out? That's how you discover authenticity and presence and confidence, when you're willing to do the inner work, the discipline of doing the inner work.
And I think another, byproduct of that approach is your consistency as well. And I think, people are looking for stability and leadership and consistency. And if you're a leaf and whatever the wind is doing outside, your organization, outside your family, you've got no anchor or no bedrock in which to build. So I think, one of the other important elements that there, and I think confidence comes from consistency as well.
Yes.
Because if you don't have a constant thematic and you don't have a constant story, you can't adapt it to your environment. I remember you probably have the same experience as, learning to craft a keynote and tell your story, the ability to tell it to an 8-year-old, a 14-year-old, someone in their mid-20s, someone who's 40, someone who's in their 60s. The meat of the story is the same, but the way in which you do your storytelling has to change. There's no point getting into, the complex ins and outs of execution of a business with an 8-year-old. An 8-year-old wants to be inspired and wants to, and I think in journalism, you kind of try and talk to a 14-year-old or something. Like the goal is to not make it too deep and too complex for someone to comprehend. Which brings me to another point. I think leaders it's so easy to just find a piece of information online now. It's so easy to go into a large language model and type in some ideas and just parrot, right? What do you see some of the risks of that? What do you see some of the risks for a leader who doesn't really take ownership of information? I feel like there's 3 tiers of information. There's information, knowledge, and wisdom. Yeah. Do you have any advice for a leader based on your history of how to take a whole bunch of complexity and a whole bunch of information and then get it into a headline, get it into a hook, get it into some detail? And the common mistakes, I guess, that you see with leaders and how they ambush their storytelling.
When you say ambush their storytelling, do you mean that they throw too much information in? Because
they're well intentioned.
Okay. Yes.
But they're just kind of overwhelming.
Yes. Simple is often better. Do not use too much industry jargon. People get hung up on thinking, well, I've got to sound smart. I've got to sound like a subject matter expert. I have to dump in my credentials. No. And again, it comes back to, do you know your audience? What's going to relate and connect to them? Can you figure that piece out and then work from there? Too many people go down rabbit holes. They feel like they need to show how smart they are, all of the details, and you don't. Let people ask questions. Let people come and see, oh my gosh, I've wanted to learn more about X. We didn't have time to get into X. Let people come to you with more information. Asking for more information is what I'm trying to say. It comes down to connection, Boo. How are you going to connect with people? Sure, you can read a book on leadership, but is that authentic to you? Maybe, maybe not. Are you putting some of those tools and tips and techniques and practices into practice? Are you making those things your new habits? Are you letting go of habits that aren't serving you well and implementing ones that will? And that's where a coach comes in handy, because you don't always know. You don't know.
Well, and that's the thing about it, it's understanding you, but it's not about you. And I think, the way that we're engineered as humans, we have so many blind spots and we don't tend to invest in that different perspective on that and that red team, that ability to have somebody who's honest with you and doesn't just yes you up and just allow you to start to believe some of the myths that you've created about yourself and about the organization. Liz, as we close out the podcast, what I love to do is to give leaders 3 things that they can actually do as soon as they finish this podcast to help, in this case, build their presence, build their confidence, and embrace preparation. So if you were to just have a leader in front of you and they're new, they're kind of overwhelmed, what would be the 3 things you would advise them to do to start their journey to embody Liz Brunner?
Work with Liz Brunner.
Yeah. Number two. Yeah.
No.
Give me a call. Email
Exactly.
the email address in the show notes.
You can, when you're, think about that storytelling piece and really focus on preparation. And people say, I don't have time. Well, you have to begin to block time off in your calendar. You have to set the boundaries and say, tell your assistant, tell yourself, whatever it needs to be, you need to block off time in your calendar where you can prepare. I don't care if it's 30 minutes, it's an hour. I don't care. You have to block time off in your calendar to prepare so that you can create the right story, so that you can figure out what is the open, middle, and the close, starting with the close, so that you can put the right story together. And who's
okay, so if you're just running back-to-back meetings from 7 till 7,
I know.
That's a red flag, right? So red flag immediately.
Yes.
You're having too many meetings because you're not preparing and you're not doing your storytelling.
And I tell people all the time, do a time audit. Does that meeting really have to be an hour, or can it be 45 minutes? Does that meeting need to be 30 minutes, or can it be 20 minutes? 9 times out of 10, Boo, the answer is yes. You can shorten most of that. But it means manually going into the calendar and changing the time on it.
I mean, you must do 20 to 30 stories on a news bulletin in 30 minutes. So I think it goes to show how much impactful storytelling you can do in a really short period of time. Okay, so cool. All right, folks, get off the podcast and immediately give yourself 15 minutes to 30 minutes before opening your mouth for being president's leader. Prepare. Okay, that's 1. What about 2?
Preparation. Okay, and the preparation accounted for a whole bunch of things in that little thing.
Yeah, there's like 3 things in that. But anyway, yeah. So we'll prepare before we start to exert influence.
Incorporate Liz's 4 C's. Number 1 is confidence. Number 2 is knowing your content. Number 3 is having clarity of your content and delivering in a conversational way. Liz's 4 C's. And the third piece, so we have preparation. And of course, Liz's 4 C's kind of falls into that as well. But then I really want you to, and this is no particular order, okay? But I really want you to think about intentional transformation. What are you doing to align your physical, your mental, and your relational self? Because when you do, it's going to take you to the next level every single time. And that will lead to more confidence, will lead to more presence, authenticity, and influence. Now, that's a lot. Those are 3 big things that I've just shared. But I'm telling you, when you begin to apply them, take 1 step, make 1 slight change. You can't do all these all the time immediately. Just pick 1 thing and go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. Liz is a phenomenal keynote speaker. I've had the chance to see her show reel. If you get a chance, well, it's down in the show notes. So you can go and have a look at that. Go and have a look at that right now. But I think, if you're listening, this word intentionality is a recurring theme for leaders. This idea of being prepared, of thinking before you do things, is a recurring theme. And I hope as you're listening and you're hearing these stories from so many powerful and intention-driven people, that you just stop for a minute and start to bring thinking into your daily practice as a leader. So yeah, guys, your team, Liz, for those that are driving or on the train and don't have the ability to scroll down right now, how can we find you?
Pretty easily, lizbrunner.com, LizBrunner.com, lizbrunner.com. You'll find everything there about my services, about my keynotes, about my book, and even some of the podcasts that I've done over the last 5 years. So,
and it's important. We didn't even mention this, but you have V2 of the book. You have updated.
Yes.
You've brought it into the digital era. You've got a version of the book that people can go out right now. I'm not meant to say this, but there's another one on the way to help you embrace your storytelling and your journey to intentional transformation.
Exactly.
Hey, Liz, I'm super grateful. I'm blessed to have you here on the podcast with me here today. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible energy with myself and everyone listening.
Thank you so much for having me, Boo. It was a pleasure.